Thank you very much for joining me on the Voice of Jobs podcast. This is Mark. And if you want to know more about me, what I do, go to voiceofjobs.com. Articles, podcasts, videos, there's all kinds of resources I have there. Feel free to take advantage of those anytime that you want. Today, I'm presenting a short excerpt from the Smarter Career and Business Moves LinkedIn Live I did last week with Annette Richmond. You probably heard her on the channel here before, other excerpts I've done of other podcasts. I've visited hers as we talk about the great rebalance and what it means for you. I want you to hear an excerpt from here. So you'll go to her podcast, subscribe to her podcast, and listen to the whole interview there. I hope you'll be able to get a lot of value out of it because we're talking about layoffs. We're talking about quitting. We're talking about why things are the way they are now as opposed to where they were 10 years ago. I thought it was a very interesting discussion, so I want to share it with you so you'll go back and listen to it and share it with other people who you may feel need at this particular time where there's a lot of announcements of layoffs. It may not affect you, but it may affect someone, so you can pass it on to someone else. Also, I've been putting on my YouTube channel more shorts. If you haven't heard of YouTube shorts, they can be anywhere from 15 seconds to 1 minute. And I present a number of different shorts in about a minute, a half a minute to a minute of some really good advice that we've gotten on this podcast in the past or something I've been a part of. But I want you to go and listen to some of those shorts and give me feedback. Is this something that you really need to hear? Did you enjoy the content? I hope you subscribe to the channel if you haven't. Feel free to. That's under my name, Mark Anthony Dyson. But I want you to also tune in. I'm going to put a link in the show notes for this afternoon. Today is February 28th, and at 12 o'clock Central, 1 o'clock Eastern, I'm going to be with my friend Lisa Rangels. We talk about bad layoffs advice. I'm around the internet streets here trying to give what I can and also support who I can. So feel free to join in. I'm going to put a link so you can register, so you can be in on that Zoom call. It's for all my listeners, people watch, people subscribe to the email list I usually send out. I haven't been sending it lately as well as I should, but I did send out one last week for sure. But I'll be sending it out regularly now. I've got a lot of my act together. All things are going on. What can I say? But anyway, join the show and come back. Peace and abundance. I'll see you guys next week with another show.
My name is Annette Richmond. This is the Smarter Career and Business Moves and Live Show and pod. And so, Mark, I met you a couple of years ago through our mutual friend, Lisa Rangel. You know, I adore. I've known her forever. And I got to know you on LinkedIn, and you invited me on your show, and I was so excited. It was the first LinkedIn Live I ever did. And it inspired me to really do my own shows, which I patterned a little bit after my experience on yours. I have a friend, and I don't know if this is the only company working at Gartner, who told me they became a virtual first company. And they have a very large campus, a few buildings just at the town over from where I live. And my understanding is they are cutting back on the real estate because they are virtual first. And if they have quarterly meetings where people need to attend and people just go, they go in that time. And if they live a distance away, they stay in a hotel or whatever for a few days. And seems to be one thing that I don't think we saw 10 years ago was larger corporations embracing the whole work from home.
The work from home was a luxury, and there were exceptions to luxury for the most part back in 2010. We were talking about right after the recession. Employers own the recession and its advantages for them and getting things back in order. Because don't forget as well, as they were also exerting their power and saying, it's nice that you applied to our jobs, but we're really looking at the people who are now employed first rather than people who are not employed.
Yes.
And I shared an article on LinkedIn that was written back in 2011. It was from New York Times. If you want to find out, look up C. Rampley, 2011. And they didn't use the term employment bias, but that's what it is, where they looked at those who were employed better and more so as the realistic candidate
Yeah.
for them to hire. So they told us what they were going to hire, what they expected. And there are all kinds of things, career practitioners, which I was back at that particular time, doing workshops and things around the East Coast and through the middle of the country, will say, hey, put your volunteer and position it as if it was work experience.
Yep.
And even there was advice floating through LinkedIn at that particular time. So I remember saying, hey, put yourself as a consulting company. You remember that? I
Yeah.
don't know if you were around that time, but
Oh, yeah.
put yourself as a consulting company. So it looks like you're employed. It was like anything to get some kind of traction on your job. So there are a lot of people who are unemployed, very savvy, smart, that brilliant professionals were out of work for longer periods of time because of bias. Now, rebalance, we talk about rebalance, we're also rebalancing the perception of who's really a good hire. There's
Yeah.
really anybody
Yeah.
who's looking to get hired and can prove themselves now. At least more the employment bias still exists, fortunately.
Yeah, there's a lot of bias out there and all different things, but you just made me
Sure.
think. I remember when I was working as a recruiter, and this was like 2012-ish, I
Uh-huh.
worked with one company and there was the hiring manager in the technology area would not look
Mhm.
at anyone who didn't have 5 years with at each position that they had held, which
Right.
was crazy.
Yeah.
It was crazy.
That's insane.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. Things certainly have changed in that area. But I want to ask you about the idea of quiet quitting. That's was like the buzzword over the last maybe
Okay.
3 months, talking about quiet quitting. And I've seen
Yeah.
even humorous videos on TikTok where the boss is wanting someone to stay late and they're, my time is up at 5 and not wanting to ship in. I remember when I was in corporate, and you may as probably do as well, where you just did that. You just did it. If you had to stay late, if stuff was due, somebody was out, it was just, there wasn't even a thought of saying no, at least not for me in my positions. But I was just reading today, but I've heard in the more recently about employers sort of flipping that back with the quiet firing, where instead of, if I'm not performing well, instead of trying to get me to do better, if they feel like maybe I'm quiet quitting, that they're starting to freeze me out. I'm not getting the plum projects. I'm not getting invited to meetings. To my mind, as I'm reading that, it always was like that. If you were feeling left out, you were on your way out. So, can you talk a little bit about that whole quiet quitting, quiet firing phenomenon and, where that may be going?
Yeah. We're talking about adaptation to different behaviors. I really don't think the quiet firing, it's quiet hiring, and whatever else we're being quiet about was just, it was quiet, and it was an adaptation people made instinctively. In other words, they saw they weren't getting anywhere staying after work or coming in early and doing extra work anymore. So then they decide to draw a boundary saying, I'm not doing that anymore. And it was for that person, it was a signal saying, I'm buying my time or I'm looking somewhere else. And for the quiet hiring, it really isn't a hiring, so to speak. It's a shifting of responsibilities. Hey, we had all these people quit and these people lay off. Let's just shift their responsibility downward. But we won't change the title or the money because it's just going to be temporary. Or some people ended up doing those things for years. Remember back in the 2013, 2014, it often happened. So all these things are just adaptation of behaviors. One of the things, though, I think came out of going to be a constant is the idea of the job hopping and how job hopping really used strategically now the cat is out of the bag, how you make advances in your career. The difference between now as a strategy as opposed to 21, the spring of 21, when we had those deluge of people, 4 million people quitting per month for those few months, is people thought they were riding a wave, not realizing if my career tools sucked before I left the job, I'm bringing to my next employer these sucky tools and my attitude along with them.